Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2018 Network Plus Study Group from your friends here at ProfessorMesser.com. My name is James Messer. I'll be your host for this 1 hour of Network Plus Q&A, coming to you live from our world headquarters in Tallahassee, Florida. I'll be taking you through a number of questions, answers. We'll be talking about why the answer was correct. We'll be talking about why the other answers were wrong. And then if you stick around for the second hour, I'm opening up the phone lines. I'm taking questions from the chat room. I'll be talking to you about whatever you want to talk about. It's open phone lines. We can talk about Network Plus. We can talk about other certifications. We can talk about IT in general. We can talk about anything but IT. It's completely up to you. It is something that hopefully you'll be able to direct me and tell me what we are doing on this next set of adventures in that second hour. You never really know where it's going to go. Thanks for joining us on this, though. I would not be able to do this without you. We have this event once a month. You can always check to see when the latest event is going to be at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. You, of course, are probably aware that all of my Network Plus training courses are available for you to watch absolutely free every minute of every video. Just go to ProfessorMesser.com. There's a link on the page that will take you to the course that you would like to watch. I don't hold anything back. There's not a paywall. You don't have to register. There's just available for you to watch. I know, it's crazy. Fortunately, a number of you are nice enough to consider purchasing offline versions of this. If this is something that you might need, you can find out information about that at ProfessorMesser.com/GetNetPlus. There it is right there. Of course, you can always subscribe on YouTube. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube. I have a weekly Network Plus pop quiz question on Twitter, so you can always catch that at ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter. That may be something to consider doing as well. There are also currently N10-006 practice tests, really more like 20 question segments of questions, not really practice tests, but 20 question blocks of questions available at ProfessorMesser.com/popquiz. What I do is I archive these events and then I save those into an offline version so you can run through it on your screen and see how well you do. Over the next few weeks, we will be taking the N10-006. We'll be pulling out the ones that still apply to the N10-007, and we'll be archiving a number of our newer N10-007 study group questions. So keep checking back on that. You may find a number of new questions showing up for the N10-007 because I know a lot of people have now made the transition over to studying for that latest Network Plus exam. This is a live video study group, but I also have an audio podcast of this available afterwards. You can find out how to subscribe to these podcasts or just listen to them on this same page at ProfessorMesser.com/podcasts. ProfessorMesser.com/podcasts. Podcast with an S on the end. Podcasts. I should make this link easier to say during the study group. As I mentioned, a number of you have transitioned over to the N10-007 because right now you could take either the N10-006 Network Plus exam or you can take the N10-007 Network Plus exam. So you have a choice right now. The N10-006 is the version of the exam that was released in February 28th of 2015, and it is one that will be retired. Important date, everyone. The N10-006 will be retired on August the 31st of 2018. That is about a month and a week or so away. So a month and 2 weeks away. You got a month and a half before you're really in a position where the N10-006 goes away forever. It will be retired. And at that point, the only exam available for you to take is the N10-007. The reason I mention this is important because if you have been studying for your N10-006, you're going to want to take that exam before it's retired. The N10-007 introduced a number of new topics. About 35% of the objectives on the N10-007 are new from the 006, so more than a third. That's a good bit of topics that you would have to now restart your training, restart all of your learning, and I don't want you to have to go through that. So if you're studying for the N10-006, finish it up, get that exam done, and pass that exam before August the 31st. If you are working on your 007, pressure's off. There's no time worry there. This was just released in March the 1st of this year, and usually this exam is around for about 3 years. So you have plenty of time to study if you're already studying for your 007. By the way, if you're studying for the 006, use materials that are specifically written for the N10-006. If you are studying for the N10-007, use materials that are specifically written for the N10-007. Don't mix and match. These are two different exams with two completely different exam objectives. There's certainly overlap between them, but because of the significant 35% difference in the 007, you don't want to rely on 006 and go walk into your exam that's a 007 exam. You will be statistically less knowledgeable. There's going to be an issue when you walk in the door. You're going to see questions you don't understand. You're going to see information you weren't expecting. So don't run into that scenario as either. You don't really want to be in that position if something like that does happen. Today we're going to do Q&A though. Plenty of Q&A for the Network Plus exam. If you're someone who's just joined us for the first time, this is how it works. I use a third-party service called Socrative. This is something you can use if you are watching us live. This is only available during this live event. If you're watching this in the replay, this won't be available to you. It's one of the advantages of everyone being here live. You go to professormesser.com/QA, and it will pop open a new window there. You can have all of the messages and all of the questions and the answers that I put on the screen. They will be available to you in that window. If you are on a mobile device, you can pop open a new window and go to professormesser.com/QA. There are also Socrative student apps that you can download. You want the student version of the app, and it may ask you for a room name. That room name is Professor Messer, ProfessorMesser, just like the domain name. So you should be able to find that. And if you do all of those things right, you'll see a question like this on the screen. Well, this is a question from last month. I call this the study group rewind to see if everybody's able to see this. Which of the following would be the best reason for implementing a DTLS VPN? And you have multiple choice answers available to you. They could be, if I put them on the screen, there we go. Those multiple choice answers might be A, some applications do not use secure protocols. B, most of the VPN connections are over mobile data links. C, much of the VPN traffic is VoIP conversations. D, the VPN users are not configured for 2FA, whatever that is. And E, some VPN users will congest the link with large file transfers. And so I get to see, as you're putting answers in, you can see the numbers are updating on the screen. It's all live and in person here. And you can see that 52% of you have said that much of the VPN traffic is VoIP conversations. Nobody really, that was our largest answer. So this was a question from last week. Maybe a number of you weren't on the study group from last week. So this is a brand new question for you. 27% of you said that some applications don't use secure protocols. 8% said that most of the VPN connections are over mobile data links. And then a tie for fourth at 5% each is that the VPN users are not configured with two-factor authentication. That's what that 2FA is. And then some VPN users will congest the link with large file transfers. Well, a DTLS is a datagram transport layer security VPN. The datagram implies that we are going to be sending information over UDP. So this is a VPN specifically built for applications that use UDP. Most of the other VPNs that you might find are VPNs that use TCP to send information back and forth in an encrypted form over that tunnel. So by using a VPN that's UDP, you get all of the TCP overhead out of the way. You don't have to worry about the VPN sending information and resending packets that may have been dropped. It's very fast. So it's designed for voice over IP. It's designed for streaming technologies. It's designed for applications that focus on a UDP communication. And ideally, it's one that would work better for that. So if you did answer C, much of the VPN traffic is VoIP, voice over IP conversations. Those 54% of you got that one absolutely right. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to ask you these questions. We're going to go through this process. You can stay right on the screen that you're on. You don't have to move anything. And as I change the question, your screen will automatically update to the next question that comes by. As we go through these, most of these are multiple choice, but as some of you are probably familiar, on the Network Plus exam, the first handful of questions that you will get are questions that are not multiple choice. They are anything but multiple choice. CompTIA calls these performance-based questions. These performance-based questions could be a fill-in-the-blank. They could be a matching. They could be a drag and drop. They might be putting you at a command prompt and telling you to perform a particular function. You never know what type of question you're going to get. And usually these questions have multiple things you have to do. It's not simply choosing A, B, C, or D. So what we like to do on this study group is our first question of the study group is a performance-based question. So you can get a feel for what these performance-based questions are like. And if you'd like, you can go to any of the past study groups, watch all the replays on ProfessorMesser.com, and each first question is always going to be that performance-based question. So here is my performance-based question for you today. On Socrative, this will be a fill-in-the-blank, and I'll tell you how to fill in the blank here in just a moment. First, let's look at the question. The question is a matching question. So I'm giving you 5 different tools, and I'm giving you 5 different descriptions of tools. So you've got 5 tools here, 1 through 5, and the descriptions are A through E. So if you think they're matched up already, the answer that you could put into Socrative would be 1A, 2B, 3B, 4C, 5E, 5D. 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, 5E. Hopefully you'll do better than I am with the matching. So let's go through what the tools are, and then I'll talk about what these functions are for those of you listening on the podcast side. So the tools are, number 1 is Nmap, number 2 is pathping, number 3 is IP tables, number 4 is TCP dump, and number 5 is route. So those are your 5 tools. Maybe you've used these 5 tools before. It makes it a little bit easier to start matching these together. So here are the functions that you need to match with these tools. A is find the default gateway of a server. B is capture application information from a web server. C is determine the round trip time to a remote device. D is find an open port on a server. And E is control traffic associated with a database server. So those are the 5 functions, and I've got 5 tools. It's a 1-to-1 match. So you can't mess that one up, right? You've got it very easy way to do that. So if you're ever trying to figure out how do I match these, sometimes the questions they give you on the exam is they give you questions and they might give you 10 different functions and they give you 5 tools, which makes the question much harder because there will be some left over at the end. On this one, I had a little bit of mercy on you. So now we're matching these things up. I'm starting to see most of you are Googling very, very, very much to these. So stop Googling, try to match them up, make a note of which ones you'll have there, and we'll talk about that. The chat room folks are saying, did I already give out the CEU word? No, usually the first 10 minutes is not a good time for the CEU word. Usually it's in the later part of the hour. I want to be sure you're listening. So you'll know about CEUs, and I'll talk about the CEUs once we get to that point. You'll know when it happens. You'll be able to hear it. So these command line tools and their functions, Nmap, pathping, IP tables, TCP dump, and route, these are all commands directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. So make sure that you are familiar with those CompTIA exam objectives. If you don't have the exam objectives, make sure you download them because they are there. And one of the things that's important with this, and it's the point I'm making with this particular question, is they're not asking you for a definition of what this means. They're not asking you what Nmap stands for. They're asking you how these tools are used. So make sure that you know exactly what the tool is and what function it brings to you. So let's go through each one of these and let's see how you did with this. A number of you have put different answers in. They're coming through. So let's now see how you did with all of this. We'll start with Nmap. That's the first one on our list. And Nmap, number 1, matches with D, find an open port on a server. D for Delta. So finding open ports is really one of the basic functions of Nmap. Nmap is a remarkably powerful utility. One that I used to have an entire training course just on Nmap. For hours and hours, we would talk about Nmap. That's how powerful Nmap is. And since I made that course, it's already out of date. They've already added more functionality to Nmap. So that's one that finding a port is sort of the fundamentals of Nmap. If you're someone who really is getting into network administration and network security, Nmap is a fantastic utility. You would do well to become very familiar with the functions of Nmap. Number 2 is path ping. Path ping. Path ping matches with C, determine the round trip time to a remote device. Path ping is kind of a combination of a trace route and a ping. It maps the route out, and then it performs a ping to every stop along the way. It's a little bit tedious to sit and wait for it to perform its function, but once it finally reports back the details, it gives quite a bit of information. One of the things I like about path ping is that functionality. I use sort of one that's in the middle of path ping. MTR is one that I like to use at the command line that's not part of the exam, but it's one that I use quite a bit when I'm trying to figure out how far away something may be, where problems might be on the network. Number 3 was IP tables that matches to E, control traffic associated with a database server. IP tables is effectively a host-based firewall for Linux. So if you are someone who's trying to control the firewall functionality on a Linux device, IP tables is one of many options available to you. So that's one. Anytime you see IP tables, you can think firewalling. You can think about controlling traffic. You can think about allowing or disallowing traffic flows. Let's go to 4, TCP dump. TCP dump number 4 matches with B, capture application information from a web server. TCP dump is a way to capture information that is going over a network. It's a packet capture program. So anything that you'd like to capture across a network connection, TCP dump is a command line that allows you to do it very easily. You don't have to have any third-party application. You don't have to plug anything else into the network. You can simply sit on the server, run TCP dump, and watch all of these packets going back and forth. You can save those packets to a file. You can export them out. You can load them into a more advanced protocol analyzer to perform graphing and analysis of the data. It's a nice little utility to know as well, especially if you're familiar with the filtering functions with TCP dump. And the last one is route. Number 5 is route. And the only option we have left is A, find the default gateway of a server. And if you're running the route program on a server, that makes it very easy to figure out where the default routes may be for this particular device. It shows the routing table for that device. So it makes it easy to find the default gateway, and it makes it easy to find routes that may be going to other locations other than the default gateway. So it makes it very simple to be able to see those. So if you matched Nmap 1D, path ping is number 2, 2 is C, 3 is E, 4 is B, and 5 is A, then you got those right. You can expect a performance-based question like this on your exam. There may be matching, there may be fill in the blank, you may be dragging and dropping different things. You never know exactly what you're going to get. The point is that if you know everything in the exam objectives, you'll be able to apply the answers regardless of how the question is asked. Let's do one now. Let's revert back to our multiple choice questions so we can get away from the performance-based questions a bit, and let's go to one that is more multiple choice. It's a long question here. This is David. David is a system administrator for a legal firm. Upon checking the properties of application files, he notices that the archive bit has been set on some files, but is not on others. What would cause this archive bit to be set? Now, there's different options because this is one that you have multiple choice. Here are the multiple choice options. Is it A, the file has been backed up recently? Is it B, the file has changed since the last backup? Is it C, the archive bit is set on all files by default? Is it D, the file has been accessed by a user? Or is it E, ownership of the file has not been configured? One of those would be good to know. So hopefully you know this archive bit and what it does and why you would use it. And if you think you do know, go to professormesser.com/QA and you can answer the question right there. The archive bit is one that does come in handy. This is one you need to know. Probably goes back to the A+ requirements. I don't think we talk too much about the archive bit in A+, but certainly Network Plus and Security Plus are places that you will see the archive bit discussed. I don't know if that's too much. It's not even a hint, really. It's just a place where you may run into this. So if you're studying for Security Plus, that may be one you definitely run into. So let's have a look at what we've done. How are we doing? We have some folks that are still answering. So I'm going to wait a couple of moments longer. A number of you are finishing up your Googling of the archive bit. One of the things you should think about doing is not Googling and trying to guess what this happens to be, because that's what you should do on your exam as well. If you don't know what the answer is, don't leave it blank. At least choose something that you think is close. You will not be penalized for getting a question wrong. The only thing that can happen is that you get points for accidentally getting it correct. So it's always an upside. If you leave it blank, there's no opportunity at all for an upside. So at least go through and answer that. So let's see what our potential options are. Let's see how we did with this one. You can see that 47% of you have said B, the file has changed since the last backup. 30% of you have said the file has been backed up recently. We have a tie for third at 9% apiece of the file has been accessed by a user and ownership of the file has not been configured, and 7% say that the archive bit is set on all files by default. So now we're getting into more of the archive attribute. Whenever you see the archive bit, it is one, if you look at the properties of a file, you'll see there's a bit, a 1 or a 0, effectively, a check mark or not a check mark that is associated with every file that's in the file system. This archive bit is one that is set whenever the file is modified. So if you make a change to a file, the archive bit will be set, effectively telling you you should probably archive this. You've now changed this file. It's something that has not been backed up. You should probably make sure you have a copy of this somewhere. So that's why whenever you perform a backup, the backup system is going to look at all of the files. If you're doing a full backup, you're obviously going to be backing up every file anyway. But what if you wanted to create an incremental backup where you're backing up all the files that have changed since the last incremental backup? So you only want to copy the things that have been updated. There's not necessary to copy the entire operating system files if none of those operating system files have been changed since the last backup. So the incremental backup is going to look at all of the files that have an archive bit that have been set, because it knows, oh, that file must have been modified. And then once it finishes backing up the file, it clears the bit. If you go in and you change the file again, the next time the backup goes through the process, it sees that the archive bit has been reset. It's now set to a 1, and it copies the file because obviously it's been changed. So it's important to know all of, not just the archive bit, but the differences between a full backup, an incremental backup, and a differential backup for your Network Plus exam, the N10-007. This comes directly from Exam Objective 3.2 and my video called Backup and Recovery for the file backups. So if we look at our potential questions here, if the file has been changed since the last backup, we know that what would cause the archive bit to be set, that's what would cause the archive bit to be set, is that the file has changed. So 49% of you that answered B got that one absolutely correct. If a file has been backed up recently, the backup, depending on the type of backup that's taking place, may choose to remove the archive bit to clear it. So you may find that certain backup types will clear that archive bit after the backup is done. But that is not what causes the bit to be set. So you can always find the differences there. The archive bit is set on all files by default. It is not set by default on all files. But it is one that if you do change, you add a file, I guess technically it's going to be updated at least one time, but that's not the default. There are certain files on your system that don't have this archive bit either. So those are usually part of the internal operating system files. Everything that we see, though, has that option there. The file's been accessed by a user. User access has nothing to do with the archive bit. And ownership of the file has not been configured. Ownership has nothing to do with the archive bit either. So if you did answer that the file has been changed since the last backup, that 50% or so of you got this one absolutely right. Well done. We've got other questions here, so let's do another one. I've got a question. Let's go through this Network Plus question, which asks, which of these technologies would most commonly use a certificate as an authentication factor? Which of these technologies would most commonly use a certificate as an authentication factor? Would it be A, radius? Would it be B, CAC? Would it be C, TACX Plus? Would it be D, TOTP? Or would it be E, LDAP? Which of these technologies would most commonly use a certificate as an authentication factor? If you think you know the answer, do not answer in the chat room. You want to go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. So hopefully you will be able to figure out which one of those technologies would most commonly use a certificate as an authentication factor. And all of those technologies have something to do with authentication. So this is kind of a tough one if you haven't gone through the N10. This is definitely an N10-007 question. If you haven't gone through that N10-007, this may be something that you haven't seen before. If you're taking the N10-006, I'm trying to think about what was on the N10-006. I don't think this was on the 006. I think this is definitely a 00. Maybe it is, now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe it is. They all blend together after a while. Now, fortunately, at the end of next month, there's no need, we don't have to worry about that. We know that it's all going to be N10-007. Which of these technologies would commonly use a certificate as an authentication factor? So let's see how we're doing so far. A number of you have answered. Let's see how you've answered on this one. Oh, we're pretty torn. We're not quite sure on this one. Nobody went over 40% or so. TACX Plus at 39% is in the lead at this point. Radius is 29%. 30% of you have said radius. 20% of you said LDAP. 9% said CAC. We're down to single digits. And 3% said TOTP. Some of you in the chat room said it feels like a Security Plus question. This would be a question that would also apply to Security Plus as well. There's a good chunk of overlap with security on the A+, the Network Plus, and the Security Plus. So you will get a nice chunk of security questions on your Network Plus exam. Pretty important. So let's see which one of these would be the right one to use a certificate as this. Well, certificates are ones, they can be used in many different ways for authentication, but one very common way to have the certificate with you always is to have the certificate as part of a smart card. So this private key, this certificate that is only known to you, or in your case, only something only you own, is part of a smart card. This might be the ID card that you wear with a lanyard around your neck. Maybe it's one that is on a USB key. You carry the USB key around as the certificate. But smart cards is a very common way to do this. One type of smart card is the PIV, the personal identity verification card. This is a card that's commonly used in the United States federal government. And so it provides picture and identification information on the card, which makes it very easy to see that information. Another type of card used by the federal government, specifically the U.S. Department of Defense, is the CAC, the Common Access Card. So you will see that associated with a picture identification card. So you've got your picture, you've got information about who you are. It doubles as your ID card. And as you're authenticating, you can slide that card in, and it's got your private key. It's got your certificate on there with that smart chip that's available on that device. You might see this being used with something like IEEE 802.1x, where you are authenticating to a network. It asks you for your username information, it asks you for your password, and then it might ask you to slide in your smart card so that it can check the certificate. It has one half of the certificate on the server. It checks to see if it matches the certificate that you happen to have on your smart card. And if those match, then you must have your card with you. You must be the one that's there. So it makes another authentication factor by having that available. And that would be the CAC, the Common Access Card option that's available here. B, only 12% of you chose the Common Access Card. That was the right answer for this question. And I must admit, when I made the question, I chose something that was very unique to the N10-007 that most of you probably haven't even seen yet. So now you know This is one of the advantages of doing these types of questions early on in the N10-007 life cycle is now you know about the CAC, you know about the certificates that can be stored on them, and you know how they're used by the U.S. Department of Defense. Radius does certainly not commonly use a certificate as an authentication factor. Radius is one where most of the time you're using username and password to allow access into a system. Some of these can be able to extend the functionality. You can add certificate functionality to these, but Radius doesn't commonly require it. Whereas something like CAC, that's part of the component. That's why you have it, is so you can put that certificate on the device. You've got TACAX Plus. TACAX Plus, again, doesn't require a certificate, doesn't commonly use one, although you could add one to TACAX Plus. LDAP, another authentication method, doesn't really use certificates either, although, of course, you can be able to extend that functionality. And TOTP, being able to use that time-sensitive key, the code, the pseudo-random access code as an authentication factor is a common one, but has nothing to do with certificates and being able to use those. So hopefully that's one where if you're trying to figure out how do I use certificates, there's so many different ways to take advantage of these. And on the Network Plus exam, you're just getting into a very little bit of certificates. When you get into Security Plus, there is extensive certificate type communication, conversation, knowledge that you're going to need about all of these things. So hopefully for the purposes of your Network Plus and the N10-07, this one came from section 4.2, my video called Authorization, Authentication, and Accounting, AAA, is where you would see that particular topic. Hopefully that's one you were able to find as well. And you can always watch that video and learn just a little bit more on how those technologies are used. Let's do another question. Got one here. We're going through these pretty well. So here's a question that asks, a company has just installed a new application that will be accessed from the internet. Which of the following would be the best way to determine which ports will be accessible from the client? This is almost a reverse multiple choice question that kind of follows the performance-based question we had earlier, because the possible answers are A, path ping, B, trace route, C, TCP dump, D, NS lookup, and E, nmap. So hopefully you were listening during that first part of which ones these might be, because this might help you through this question. This is one, by the way, that have a very good description. This is a very good example of things you might run into in your exam. If you do know the answer to this, by the way, you can go to professormesser.com/QA. Please don't answer in the chat room. We want everybody to have the same chance at getting this right as everyone else. But on the exam, one of the things I often will tell people is it might be a good strategy to skip over all of their performance-based questions at the very beginning of the exam. And this is how I approach it anyway, because I'm not a good test taker. There's a lot of anxiety when I walk into the test taking room. I'm reading the first question and I'm not even understanding what I'm reading. The adrenaline is going. You just don't understand what you're doing. It's a weird environment. It takes a few minutes to finally settle down and get into the groove and finally be able to answer these questions. So for me, that is not the time I need to start attacking performance-based questions. Fortunately, on these exams from CompTIA, you can jump to any question on the exam at any time. They don't force you down a series of questions. Cisco exams, for example, you have to answer question 1. And when you answer question 1, it takes you to question 2, and you can't back up. You also can't jump ahead. On CompTIA, it allows you to jump all over the place. So you should take advantage of this. I jump over all the performance-based questions. I go through multiple choice. And what I find is some of the things in the multiple choice questions help me with things that I now have to know about the performance-based questions. This is probably a good example of this. If you go through this question and you think you get this one right, it's probably going to help you with a performance-based question that we saw earlier. So if we were really listening during and I say this, so here's how we're going to find out. How many of us were listening to the explanation of the performance-based question earlier? Well, 72% of us were listening. This is how my world is, by the way. I get listened to about 72% of the time at home as well. So 72% of you chose Nmap E. So that's why I think that's probably going to be the right answer for what we're looking at. A three-way tie for second. Traceroute, TCP dump, and NS lookup all came in at 8%. And then path ping, 5%, which is why those are, when you look at this and say, if we had to phone a friend, if we had to go 50-50, if we had to ask the audience, 72%, that's pretty good for Nmap. Is it really the right answer? Is Nmap really the one we should? Yes, that's exactly what it is. Nmap, the network mapper, as I mentioned, is exceptionally good at identifying ports that are available on a particular device. So whenever you start looking at trying to do port scans, finding out what ports are there, Nmap is great at doing that. Nmap can also do operating system scans. So imagine you're looking at a device across the network. You have no idea what this device is. You can have Nmap send some specially crafted packets to that device, not authenticate into the device, not gain access to the operating system at all, but simply send some particular types of packets, only a few, to the device. And depending on how the device responds, Nmap is able to make a determination on what operating system is running on that device. Now, that's remarkable because Windows responds in a certain way. Linux responds in a certain way. Different versions of Windows respond in a certain way. So Nmap is able to get down to specific version numbers of operating systems depending on the type of response it gets from these devices. Extremely powerful program. Nmap can also do a service scan. So let's say we've done an Nmap scan to a device, and we're able to determine that port 80 is open. So we're thinking maybe it's a web server. So we'll ask Nmap, go perform a service scan of that device. And again, Nmap is not authenticating into that device. It's simply sending specially crafted packets to the device, and it's looking to see the type of response that comes back. So it's sending a certain type of statement of certain type of packet, perhaps an application request, and you get a certain type of application response. And from those different responses, it's able to get messages about what type of service. It will tell you that it's Apache web server. It will tell you the version of Apache. It'll give you details about that version of Apache. And Nmap is also extremely flexible with something called NSE, which is the Nmap scripting engine, where you can greatly extend the functionality of what Nmap can do. This is just a little bit of what Nmap does. And those of you that did answer Nmap, this is the best way, the super best way to determine which ports will be accessible from a client. So that is exactly the way you should look at this as well. Now, whenever you start looking, by the way, the Network Plus exam is full of content like knowing tools, understanding topologies, understanding how proxies work, dealing with security questions that we saw before. There is an extensive amount of information on the Network Plus exam. And as you've seen, as you go through my videos, you'll notice that I put a lot of information onto every single slide. I put the details of what you need. In some cases, I give you a graphical overview of how some of these protocols work, how some of these other types of systems interact with each other. They are all in this particular set of videos. But of course, some people don't have time to go through every single video. You don't have time to take detailed notes on every single video. So what I've done is create a set of notes that come directly from my video series. This is the Professor Messer N10-007 course notes. It's a set of notes. I have a picture of this on my screen. Let me bring up a set so you can see what these look like. These are the course notes. They're in PDF format, so you can download these immediately, and they step through each one of my video content step by step. So every single video is represented here. Every bit of text from every single slide I've put onto this. I make sure that you've got the graphics. I make sure that you've got the details of what happens to be there. They are all in these course notes. And I also have physical versions of the course notes. So if you're someone who doesn't really like PDF versions, you would rather have a version that is the actual book version of the course notes, I have one for you. And a benefit of this is if you get the physical version, and I will ship you the physical version to your door, I will also include the digital version for free. So as soon as you buy the physical version, you can also download the digital version while you're waiting for that to arrive in the mail. If you'd like to find out more about that, you can learn more at professormesser.com/NPCN. And thank you for all of you that have sponsored and purchased this particular set of course notes. It goes a long way to making these course notes and really the entire site available for anybody that's there. So hopefully this is something that you can get some value from as well. So thanks for your ongoing support of this. We really couldn't do it without you. And you can find out more again at professormesser.com/NPCN7 for the N10-007 course notes. Let's keep this going. I've got more questions available for you. And here's a question where someone is, let me make sure I can bring this up on your side. I'll bring up my screen so that it will change on your side. The question is asking, Richard is trying to use an application, but the login screen does not appear. He suspects that the issue may be related to a firewall blocking the port number of the application. Which OSI layer would be associated with this issue? And as you can imagine, I've listed every single OSI layer that's here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So now you have a choice. Now you have to figure out which of these OSI layers is associated with this. The question is that Richard is trying to use an application, but the login screen doesn't appear. He suspects the issue may be related to a firewall blocking the port number of the application. Which OSI layer would be associated with this issue? So maybe this is one that you're familiar with. This is one where the OSI layer is one that you're going to have to figure out where it fits. And the OSI layer is really one that is pretty important. We talk about the OSI layer all the time when we talk with other network professionals, when we talk with security professionals. This is one that helps us all understand at a very common level where certain functionality is as it's going across the network. So if you're talking to a firewall professional, they will talk to you about what OSI layer is happening on this firewall, at which point. Some firewalls work differently than others. But this question is very specific. I'm trying to take you down a particular section of this. In fact, I'm going to kind of peek at the answers that are coming in with this one. And the OSI model obviously is something you have to know for your Network Plus exam. It's part of Network Plus. It's part of Security Plus. You don't see on the A+. So if you're an A+ watcher here, you don't have to worry about the OSI layer until you get to the Network Plus side of things. But boy, it does come in handy when you're trying to communicate with other network professionals. So how did we do with this one? Let's reveal on our screen. Well, we have a nice bell curve there, except for layer 7. So you can see that 42% of you have said layer 4. 21% of you have said layer 7. We have 18% that said layer 3, and then single digits for all of the other layers that are here. So the real question is, which one is it though? Because the question asked that Richard thinks that the issue may be related to a firewall blocking the port number of the application. And that's your clue with this question, that we're talking about a port number. And whenever we're talking about a port number, we're talking about OSI layer 4. This is the transport layer. So whenever you're dealing with anything relating to a TCP port number or a UDP port number, we're really talking about the transport layer. That's where you should focus your efforts on. A lot of legacy firewalls, and by legacy, I mean really old at this point, old style firewalls allow or block traffic based on a port number. So you would tell that firewall block port 80, and it will block anything traversing port 80. Modern firewalls don't use that methodology anymore. We were talking about this in the chat room on my website last night, is that modern firewalls look at the data going by, and on port 80, they determine, oh, that's Twitter. That's generic web traffic. That is an application, and it allows or disallows based on the name of the application. But in this question, very specifically, we were asking, well, he suspects the issue may be related to a firewall blocking the port number of the application. And that was your clue to say, aha, a port number. We're really talking about OSI layer 4 anytime we're talking about a port number. So hopefully that's one as you're trying to decipher how the OSI model works. And it is a challenge to decipher because it's not a physical thing. You can't really run through the OSI model in a lab. You can't put together switches and routers and display the OSI model. It's more of a concept. And so it's one that it takes a while to wrap your head around and figure out, how does that whole thing work? But anytime you see a port number, we're really talking about OSI layer 4. You can check that box whenever you run into something like that. We've got time for more questions, so let's do another one. And quickly, let's go back. 39% of you answered OSI layer 4. So that would be the correct answer in this case. It would not be layer 7. 19% of you said layer 7. Layer 7 is associated with the application side of things, the things that we see on our screen. So the problem in this particular case, you may be thinking, I'm having an application problem. I'm having a problem at layer 7, which is where you were immediately focused. But this particular question took you down a little bit more detail. And it said, well, we think the problem is actually occurring much lower in the OSI model, that we think it's relating to the port number that's being blocked by a firewall. That's how we knew we needed to go back to layer 4. Why wasn't it layer 3? 21% of you chose layer 3. Layer 3 is dealing with IP addresses and routing. So if this problem was that we felt that the firewall was blocking the IP address to the application server, then we could say that the problem was more related to OSI layer 3. In this case, we specifically said that we think the firewall is blocking a port number. Obviously, then would be OSI layer 4 with that particular thing. If you're someone who you're working on gathering continuing education unit credits, and you're watching this video and you're thinking, I'd love to get a 1-hour CEU, a webinar-based CEU for CompTIA, this would be a good way to do it. And I can give you access, tell you instructions on exactly how to do this. And you have to follow these instructions to the letter because the instructions themselves are part of the process of earning the CEU. So if you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, there's a Contact Us link that will bring up a link that has a name, an email address. Make sure you get those correct, or else you're not going to get the CEU that I'm sending back to you. And then there's a message box. And in there, in that message box, somewhere in there, put that this is the July 2018 Network Plus Study Group. And in there somewhere, put OSI model. You can simply just write that. I'm reading these. So if you wanted to put any other message in there, if you wanted to send me a note, this would be a good time to do it. Anything else you would like to put in there, you're more than welcome to do so. And then I will reply back to this saying, well, you must have watched this because you put the word OSI model in here. And I will send you back a digitally signed email that is good for 1 CEU. It's technically you don't need me to send you this. CompTIA will simply allow you to put that in, but I think it's nice that you have evidence. No, I really did get this. These days, I think most people are renewing their certifications with the CertMaster CE, which is an application that you would use to renew. It takes 3 to 6 hours. It costs, for Network Plus, I think it's $150, and you can run through it in 3 to 6 hours, and you're done. You don't have to collect CEUs. You don't have to pay CEU maintenance fees. It's about the same price, and you can do it on the very last day that you need to renew. So I think that's how most people are doing it, but I'll still send you a CEU. I've got an automated process, a script I run on my side that goes through the email. I check it, I click a button, and it sends it all back to you. So it's not awful to be able to send that to you. So hopefully, if you're someone who's trying to get that continuing education unit credit, that's one way you can do it. And I'm more than happy to send those out to you. We've got time for more questions, so let's do another question here. I've got one. This is more of a fill-in-the-blank question, and it's very open as to what it's asking for. So hopefully you know what this is. The question is, what cable type is this? And I don't have multiple choice on this one. This one is a fill-in-the-blank. So this one is kind of a performance-based question in a way, because I'm not giving you any hints. I'm just showing you, and for those of you on the podcast side, I'm very sorry. This is a visual daily double. This is one that is a picture on the screen of a cable map, and it's asking, what cable type is this? I guess I could describe it to you. So the cable map shows pin 1 to pin 3, pin 2 to pin 6, pin 3 to pin 1, pin 4 to pin 7, pin 5 to pin 8, pin 6 to pin 2, pin 7 to pin 4, and pin 8 to pin 5. So there, I gave you that image in your mind. Certainly you were able to keep up with me through these pieces. If you think you know what the answer is, you can answer at professormesser.com/QA. I'm looking for the name of what this is. So some of you are giving me a standard type, and it's not a standard type. So hopefully this is one you know. If you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. You want to answer at professormesser.com/QA to have those things here. This is one that does come in handy to have these things here. This is, by the way, I get questions about this cable type all the time. So maybe you're thinking about this cable type and how it works and what this is, and I get questions all the time. I get people arguing with me about this cable type. So it's a pretty good one to go through with these pieces. The chat room, some people going, the OSI is a theory. It's not a concept. No, it's pretty much a concept. Not really a theory. I'm not trying to prove anything with it. It's not something where we're trying to come up with a theory of a fact. It's just an idea. It's just a framework. It's just a concept of how things are working. And in fact, OSI model, it's open for interpretation. Some protocols even overlap multiple layers of the OSI model. Some people feel that certain protocols work at half a layer of the OSI model. We can go through pedantics with OSI for those things. So and you're right. Yes, that's a better way to put it. It's not a concrete item. It's not a concrete concept. It's one that is very much flexible, and it's nothing. If you're in an argument about the OSI model, then you need to get out of there, because there's no right answer, quite honestly. You can, of course, argue with what those happen to be. So what cable type is it? We've got all kinds of answers coming in. We get 568B. Some of you have said 568A. This is not a B. This is not an A. This cable type it's a type of cable that you would have here. A number of you said straight through. Come on now. Straight. There's nothing straight about 1 going to 3 and 2 going to 6 and 3 going to 1. So we're not going to say straight through on this one. Probably not. Crossover, that is the right answer. It's a crossover cable. It's more specifically, in fact, let's see if anybody answered the most specific it could be. Nobody has the most specific answer yet. I'm going through here. Nope. Nobody's got the most specific. Nope, almost. I'm not seeing the most specific answer, because most of you did say, as you can see on here, crossover cable. And this is a crossover cable, but there are many types of crossover cable. This one is one for Ethernet. This is an Ethernet crossover cable. It happens to be wired with a particular wire type. But there are crossover cables for wide area network serial connections that are very different than this wire map that you're seeing on the screen now. This wire map is specific to Ethernet. So that's why when we talk about crossover, the next question has to be, what kind of crossover cable do you need? Most of the time, it's one that is for Ethernet. Sometimes you need a wide area network crossover cable. Sometimes you need other types. There's other serial or cable copper wiring types that you can run into. But serial, wide area network, do you need one for a RJ48C crossover cable? So there you go. That's one wherever you work through there. That Ethernet crossover cable is what it really is for this case. And this one happens to be wired with the EIA-TIA 568B standard. The standard here has nothing to do with the pinouts, by the way. You could have a completely different set of colors here. As long as the colors are going to the right pins, would be correct. Doesn't 568B indicate it's Ethernet? It does not. 568B and 568A determine how you put the colors in what pin spots. That could be used for any 8-wire networking type. If you still had token ring networks, they could run on 568B. They could run on 568A. The 568A and the 568B are how you punch down the wires, what colors go into what pins. That's it. Has nothing to do with the topology, has nothing to do with a type of network that you're using for these wires. It only has to do with the guys you bring in that are punching down these cables, that they're not networking people, they're wire people. They know everything there is to know about how to properly install wire, and they know that a white-orange in pin 1 goes to white-orange in pin 1. That is 568B. That's a good example that's how you punch it down. Ethernet crossover cables are connecting two devices that are similar to each other. That's how Ethernet crossover works. One of the things that you see here is this is an Ethernet crossover cable that's really designed to use all 8 of the pins, which is not necessarily required on gigabit Ethernet. But one of the things, and I've seen this actually written in books, is they say that the definition of an Ethernet crossover cable is 568A on one side and 568B on the other side, which is demonstrably false, as you can see by this picture. This is not 568A on one side and 568B on the other if you do all 8 of the wires. So don't run into that scenario either. Don't mix the 568A and 568B standards with the topologies that happen to be running over those wires. Those are two completely different things. And to explain them as if they were the same simply complicates people's concepts of how they are used in networking. You don't put 568A on one side and 568B on the other side. You might use this. You might find, though, if you are running 10100 Ethernet and you happen to put 568A on one side and 568B on the other, one of the idiosyncrasies of Ethernet is the 4 wires that Ethernet uses in that particular configuration now turns into a crossover cable. So I think that's where people get confused, that it seems like you should combine those. But as soon as you get into other types of Ethernet, like gig Ethernet, suddenly that falls apart. That's clearly not A on one side and B on the other. So you're more than welcome to, I look forward to your emails. I get them all the time about that particular issue. By the way, for gigabit Ethernet, gigabit, interestingly enough, is able to communicate in both directions on the same wire at the same time. So technically, gigabit Ethernet doesn't even need physical wire crossovers. It can connect everything and cross over without physically crossing over the wire. How about that? Makes it very easy to connect gig connections. All you need straight through. But you might have an environment that has a mixture of gigabit, has a mixture of 10100, and you might need a physical crossover cable like this that will work with both. So that may be something that you want to think about doing. So if you're one of the folks that answered crossover cable, absolutely correct. That is the right answer. It is not B to A. That is not a crossover cable. So already, that's what I'm talking about. I should probably just do one video that describes why that's not the case. I get so many emails about that. But that's one of those things you run into. We've got time for one more. Let's fit one more question in. I think we should be able to slide it in there since our network connection has apparently stayed up and running for us. Here's our next question. And the question is about a security administrator. Let me get it on my screen for him. So thank you in the chat room. Yes, send me a note saying that was a straight through. We could have a conversation about that. That's why I like the chat room. A security administrator would like to protect network communication for their users who are traveling away from the corporate office. The security communication should use TCP 443. Which of the following would meet these requirements? Would it be A, Secure Sockets VPN? Would it be B, SSH tunneling? Would it be C, IPsec VPN? Would it be D, FTPS transfers? Would it be E, out-of-band VPN? So you're a security administrator. You want to protect network communication for the users who are traveling away from the corporate office. The security communication should use TCP 443. Which of the following would meet these requirements? Would it be Secure Sockets VPN? Would it be SSH tunneling? Would it be IPsec VPN? Would it be FTPS transfers? Or would it be out-of-band VPN? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. And you can answer that. Don't answer in the chat room. Some of you know. I'm going to take a sneak peek at how we're doing with this one. This is one where we do have to think about communication. You will probably, if you're a network and security professional, you will be in this position where you have to configure virtual private networking. How am I going to do this for my users? Because there's so many different ways to do it. So many different ways to implement it. So many different authentication methods. You're probably going to have to implement multi-factor authentication. You're going to have to think about how people are using this VPN. Will these be people traveling? Will they be at a remote site? That is something that does come in to thinking about planning. As someone who has been that systems engineer and had to explain, well, this is how these VPN technologies work. Which one works best for you? That's one that does come in handy to know what all the different options are and how they operate. Let's see how we did with this one. How do we do? Well, we got 53% of us said A. So about half of us said A, Secure Sockets VPN, but 24% of you said IPsec VPN, and then 18% of us said SSH tunneling. 5% said FTPS transfers, and 0% said out-of-band VPN. So of course, even though nobody answered it, no, it's not out-of-band VPN. It's Secure Sockets Layer VPN. It's SSL VPN. The SSL VPN is a very common way to have end-user VPN communication. And one of the advantages of SSL VPN is that it's using a very common protocol, Secure Sockets Layer. Obviously, today it's really TLS is what this protocol is, but SSL has been around for so long, we still call it SSL, even though we really mean TLS. So one of the advantages I mentioned of this protocol is that it uses a protocol that a lot of browsers already use when you're performing secure communication. So right now, if you're on the professormesser.com/website, you are communicating to my site over SSL, over TLS, because I force all communication to my site to be encrypted. Doesn't matter if you're logging in, doesn't matter if you're purchasing a product, everything's encrypted to my site by default, just 100%. So there's nothing on my site you can get to that would be in a place where it's something that's in the clear. Everything's just encrypted. Makes it easy. So one of the challenges here in working through these is trying to figure out what the right answer would be. And the only option that we had available that used TCP 443 was the SSL VPN. Now, so you'd have to know what is secure sockets? How does that work? What is he referring to in that particular case? It would not be IPsec VPN, which uses a number of different protocols, UDP and sometimes TCP protocols to communicate. If you're in a hotel room, there's usually a lot of filtering in these networks that you're on remotely. And so something that is not a well-known or well-used protocol may be blocked by certain firewalls. So you may find that something that uses SSL port 443 is so common because all these other websites use it. That's the one that gets through that firewall at that hotel. IPsec probably wouldn't. So the 22% of you, that's not one that uses TCP 443. And SSH doesn't use TCP 443 either. It uses the SSH protocol. So you're going to be running something completely different than TCP 443. So that would not be the one either for the 19% of you that shows that. So the correct answer here, 54% of you. I'd like to get half of you getting these right. And the half of you did choose A, Secure Sockets VPN. That would be the correct answer for this particular question. Well done with that. This first hour is already over. How's that possible? But we have another study group next month. In fact, it's less than next month. Now it's the 18th of July. This was on August the 8th. So in August, we're going back to our first Wednesday is A+, second Wednesday is Network Plus, third Wednesday is Security Plus. So we're getting ready for the fall for those. So that is where you need to come if you want to show up for the next Security Plus. But of course, if you're watching this replay and we're well past August the 8th of 2018 and you're wondering when is the next event, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar and I'll tell you exactly when the next event is going to be. Well, thanks for joining us. Stick around for the next hour, by the way. I'm going to open up the phone lines. You can ask other questions. You can yell at me about crossover cables, whatever you'd like. But don't forget to follow us on Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter. You can follow us on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. The course notes, don't forget about those at professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus course notes. And of course, there's links on my website on getting access to those as well. Thank you for joining us, though, for this first hour. Stick around for the second hour. I'll open up the phone lines, and you can call in with whatever topic you would like. If you have to leave us now, though, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Okay, that's what I need is a convention. In San Diego? Why would it be in San Diego, though? Let's get the phone lines up and running. I probably want to be on my own time zone. Let's go. I see there was a little bit of a bump there in the middle of the show, but let's get the phone lines up and running. I have to click some things on my side to make this happen. So let's click those and get these running. I have to call into my own show. So while I do that, I'll put up the phone. There we go. Put up the phone numbers there so you can call into the show while I also call into my own show. How does that work? I'm sure I have a system to dial in here. It's probably going to make some noise, so I should probably turn this down. Okay. And then I have to click a thing here, and then I have to type in a show number and follow that by a £.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Well, that sounds redundant. I'll put that in. And again, I'll click this, and it says,
"Welcome."
Yeah, see? I like the welcome part. So if you would like to call in, you're more than welcome to. You can call in from anywhere in the continental United States, toll free, at 855-785-7545. That's 855-785-RJ45. You can also call on Skype for free. So if you're a Skype user, you can put a +1 at the beginning, +1 855-785-7545. You can also ask questions in the chat room. So if you're someone who is in the chat room now and you have some questions you'd like to go through, you can go to professormesser.com/live and ask a question there. Now, obviously, if you're watching this in the replay, you can't call in. Well, you can call in. You'll get a message that you can leave a message. So that doesn't help you very much if you're trying to get interactive. But anytime throughout the week, you can always go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, and you're more than welcome to call in there and have all of those things available. Be able to talk, put a message in there. You can send questions. You can put a lot of things in there. Try to get all of these back for those of you that are trying to get questions asked. Sometimes not so easy to do that, but I do try. So from the chat room, is there an RSS feed for the calendar? There is not, but there is a link. There's a Google Calendar link. If you go to professormesser.com/calendar, Google Calendar might have an RSS feed for that. But there is no RSS feed for the calendar, so sorry. But Google Calendar may be the option for you because a lot of things already integrate into Google Calendar. That might be a good way to do that. So that might be useful, have those things there. Another question in the chat room. This is more about inside baseball, but we'll certainly talk about it. Do I think I'd ever make content for the Pen Test Plus? Sure. It's certainly possible that I would ever make content for the Pen Test Plus. The challenge, though, is I don't think Pen Test Plus has the potential to be popular enough for me to make content for it. So for me to make content, I need it to be very popular. I need enough people taking that exam because it usually takes at least 3 months to build a course. So it takes quite a bit of time. And when I'm committing to building a course, that is a lot of time. And that's all I do is I sit in here and I build a course. I come in the morning, create content, get some lunch, come in the afternoon, create content. So that's all I do is just sit here at this desk and make content. So if that's the content I'm going to make, there has to be people watching that content to be valuable enough. It's the same problem with CASP, by the way. It's the same problem with any of these other security type courses. There's just not the numbers there to be able to have that type of coverage. So it's really just a numbers thing. If it suddenly became the most popular certification and everybody was doing Pen Test Plus, okay. But I said the same thing about CASP when it came out, and said the same thing about CySA when it came out, CySA Plus. So I was trying to figure out, I've been trying to see, are these going to get more popular? And they just have not. But I wasn't expecting it to. When you start getting past Security Plus and any type of security certification, these become much more niche. So Pen Test Plus especially. Pen Test Plus is very, very niche. Relatively speaking, there are very few penetration test jobs available in the security industry. There's so few percentage-wise. If you want a job in security, that's not what you're going to go after. You're going to go after one of the much more available jobs. And so Pen Test Plus just doesn't have the appeal that even a broader certification might have. If I looked at other certifications for security that were out there right now, there might even be a more of a need for a manufacturer's certification than there would be something like Pen Test Plus. So it would be more, Palo Alto Network Firewall might have more popularity than Pen Test Plus. I don't know that that's the case, but I'm giving an example of how other certifications are certainly going to be bigger than Pen Test Plus because Pen Test Plus can only be so big. There are only so many pen test jobs out there for people to want to do that type of thing. Am I going to make CCNA? I'd love to make a Cisco related course. I don't have any current plans to make a Cisco related course. Right now, A+ is the next one that's being updated on my side. A+ is in a certification that's being updated probably December timeframe. So I'm currently working on that content, trying to get all of those videos ready for that release. Once that's done, we're finally to 2019. What do I do next? I don't know. I'm not sure, for those of you. And I don't have Linux Plus either. Sorry. Don't have any of those. Linux Plus is not I did some Linux Plus videos, which proved to me that I shouldn't be doing Linux Plus videos. That's the level of feed. I got some very pointed feedback from people, and that determined that Linux probably isn't in my future either. So that's the next step. Once I hit January of 2019, now I get to decide, what do I want to create? Some of you in the chat room already said, I need Network Plus questions. So do I create a Network Plus Q&A book? Very similar to my pop quiz book for A+. Do I create one for Security Plus as well? Those are things people are asking about that I know people need because there's really bad questions out there. And I know I can create some questions that people might like. So there you go. Is there a time frame where the A+ tests expire if you don't take both? Can one expire before taking the other? The way A+ works, for those of you not familiar with the A+ certification, is that there's 2 exams you have to take to become certified. If you pass one exam, doesn't mean anything. There's no certification associated with it. You have to pass both of them. And they are a pair. They're twins. So if you pass the 22901, you have to pass the 22902, and only after you've passed both of those are you A+ certified today. Those particular certifications, exams, will probably be retired somewhere about this time next year, because we think they're going to release a new version of the A+ in December, and they usually give a 6-month overlap, which means those current A+ certifications will probably retire about this time next year. So the question is, can one expire before taking the other? Well, they both would expire before you're able to take the other. But you could have taken the first 901 or 902 and passed it 3 years ago. And as long as you're able to take the next one before the entire series is retired, you're certified. So there's no timeout, there's no delay, but you have to get both of them in before the entire series is retired. Otherwise, you have to start over again with the new series. So if they were to release a new A+ series in December, you have about 3.5 years to pass both of those. You could take one the first day it's available and one the last day it's available. 3.5 years later, and you would be A+ certified. So that's one of those. People in the chat room still asking about Cisco, and Cisco is on my list. I have, of course, my ICND1 set of course notes, and literally created a course so that I could have notes for the course, except I never released a course. So that's one of those that I'd love to go back and do a video series on this. But the amount of things that have to be done to do a video series on this, the number of variables that go into making that decision is just extensive. Very often we sit around and ask, what are we doing next? Why should we do it that way? And it's a constantly changing set of priorities. And it's based on what people are asking for. It's based on the popularity of certain certifications. It's based on how new those certifications might be. It's based on how popular those certifications are. It's based on whether the certification has interest to me, because I don't want to spend 3 months doing something I'm not interested in doing. And it may not be a course. It may be, maybe I should be spending my time doing something else, creating another QA book, doing one for Pop Quiz, creating sample exams that people could take. Those might be more popular than other things. And so there's the problem with this is I can't go to a machine and put in all of this stuff and have it spit out to me what makes sense. This is what you should do first. This is what you should do second. There's no Google for this. So it's one where it's constantly flowing. It's like you're on the waves. The waves are constantly going up and down. What should we do? Where should we go with this? So that's the real challenge. The 100-105 has been out for a while. It's a combination of the ICND1, the ICND2, or you can take the single 100-105. So the ICND1 that I have is current to the current ICND1. So that's one of those. The 100-105 has been around years now. So and they will update that again soon as well. That will be another one of those cases where you just have to figure out what is needed today. And then whatever project it is takes 3 months. So you finish that project and then you say, what's now needed today? And it may be very different. I may think 3 months from now, I'm going to do this. And then 3 months from now, it's a very different story. You just never know where things are going to go in this industry. Also from the chat room, is a security degree a good direction to go? It very well may. If an IT degree focused in security, but one of the things you have to know about security in IT is security is usually a place you move up into. There are not a lot of entry-level jobs in IT security. Probably that seems obvious, but it's the case. Normally you get a very solid foundation in networking, and at that point, you are moved into IT security. And that's because, and we're talking only about IT security. We're not talking about security of applications. We're not talking about security on the malware analyst side. That's more of computer science. I'm really talking about information technology. And that's where I draw the line is there's IT and there's computer science. So computer science is more the development side of things. IT is more on this side. I recognize there is a somewhat reasonable expectation in the industry that these things will be merging. I'm not buying it, by the way. I don't think it has quite I think it's a great idea. I think it's great in idea. It's going to be difficult in execution. But for IT security, it has such a big foundation in networking. Most of what you do in IT security is you're understanding how to work with operating systems and networks, and you're applying security on top of that, which are difficult enough as it is. So having that knowledge, though, of the security world helps you once you get to that point. But don't expect that you're going to go and get a IT security degree and somebody's going to hire you in a security role. They're probably not going to start you there. They're probably going to start you in help desk or networking, and then you go from there. Is it hard to get an IT security job with just Security Plus? It's hard to get an IT security job. So whatever you apply on top of that makes it a little bit easier. applying a security plus on top of that makes it a little bit easier. Having knowledge about the networking side of things makes it much easier. Having some experience along those lines makes it much easier. You're not going to jump into an IT security job if all you have is security plus. No, you're not going to get an IT security job. Nope. It'd be great if it worked that way. It doesn't work that way. No. You need to do a lot more work on the networking side. Apply the security plus ideas. Everything you learn in security plus, apply that on top of your networking knowledge. Get some experience on the networking side. Yeah, pretty much everybody starts in the help desk. That's where you start. Help desk, break fix, addressing problems, solving problems, becoming more familiar with the technologies, understanding more about the operating systems, working more with Windows and Linux, understanding how the network operates and routing and switching. And then you take what knowledge that you've gained and you apply some security to that. That's where the security comes. I was a systems engineer for a next generation firewall company for almost 7 years, and got there from a foundation I started with a foundation in operating systems. That took me to a foundation in networking, extensive networking. And then that's what gave me, of course, I wrote a book on Nmap that helped a bit, and then moved into security. Because a lot of what you do with security has such a foundation in the networking side. I've said that 7 or 8 times now in the last 10 minutes. It's so true. So that's where that comes from. Let's see, phone-wise, let's talk the 201 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Jim, calling from New Rochelle.
Oh, welcome, Jim. What can we do for you?
I got a question about your Network Plus course. Is that the newest revision?
Well, I've got 2 of them. Obviously, the N10-006 has been around for a number of years. And yes, I do have an N10-007 course that is for this latest version of Network Plus, yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to verify that before I purchased it. I have your A+ certification course.
Oh, great.
And it helped me pass my test. Thank you for that.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I look forward to doing some more studying with your Network Plus course.
I'm glad you are having a look at that. The Network Plus is there and available. It's one that actually, I say this every time I bring out a new course, but I think it's my best Network Plus course ever. And it probably is because I got a chance to do a lot more visuals, a lot more graphics, a lot more explaining of why and how to prevent different things. So I think you're going to like it. And of course, the entire course is available to watch online for free. And of course, if you want that offline version, I have a new digital only version of Network Plus course for $99. So for the people that don't need me to send them a flash drive, they can download over their high-speed network connection. I made a different tier that was a little more cost-effective for everyone, I think. So that might be something you want to look at as well.
Okay, I definitely will. I'll check it out.
Thanks so much, Jim. Best of luck.
All right, take care.
That's something that I'm finding is you're starting to see more of. It's been hard to find good N10-007 content. And this is something that's very common when a new version of the exam is introduced, is that there's not a lot of new content available out there for the new exam. But I think now we've gone through a number of months. We're now seeing, it's been almost 5 months now since it's been released. We're seeing more books are available. My video series has been out for months. I try to get it out very quickly. So we're seeing more and more of these N10-007, and you'll see more and more as time goes on this year as well. So that's one that does come in handy to be able to find what you need. And as I mentioned, if you're studying for N10-007, make sure your study materials are written for the N10-007. There are much changed. 35% of the content of the 007 is new from the 006. 35% of the objectives. I count every objective. I do in every single one of these. And I counted all of them and I compared them, and 36% of the objectives are brand new. So make sure that if you're planning to take the N10-007 exam, that you haven't just studied from 006 materials. You'll be at a statistical disadvantage when you walk into the door of that exam. You don't want that to happen. You want the best possible outcome to be able to do that. So that becomes handy. Folks in the chat room talking about different places to work, different places to find jobs. And that's one of the challenges we have is there's one good way to get a job. And that's to fall into it. There's no single one thing that you can tell someone in IT, this is how you get a job. If you want to be an electrician, there's a very specific path and you can be an electrician. If you wanted to drive a truck, there is a very specific path and you can drive a truck. If you wanted to work in a bank, there's a very specific path you can take and you can work in that bank. IT doesn't work that way. There are so many different ways to get to where you want to go, which is great. I think that's an advantage. So if you're someone who's also trying to get that job, use every possible thing you have available. Go to user group meetings, meet the people at these companies, become familiar with what they're doing, show up at the interview knowledgeable of their organization, ask questions about their technologies and what they're doing. You can find out so much information about these companies these days before you walk in. Make sure you take advantage of that. Let's go back to the phones. We've got the 480 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh.
Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm from Phoenix. My name is Chris.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for calling. What question you have?
I'm calling in regards to the N10-007. You mentioned there was 35% more material from the 06. Are you noticing a greater pass rate for the new test?
I have no idea what the pass rate is for these. I don't keep track of pass rates, by the way, for the people that are taking or watching my content. As you've probably seen, there's no registration required to watch my training videos. I don't have a tracking system in place for these videos. I've intentionally not created that registration wall. Even though it's free, I could create a wall where you have to register and then even for free you would have access. I just didn't want to create the barrier. What I think, though, based on what I've seen with the content, a lot of the content extremely similar. 35% different is enough to have an impact if you were to walk in the door and not be prepared. But when you think about it, a huge part of the exam is exactly the same content as the 006. And I don't find that the new content is necessarily more complex than what was on the 006. And I would not expect that if you were to take the exam, that it would be really any more difficult than the older exam happened to be. I think they're going to be very comparable in difficulty level. I don't have any evidence or statistics to prove that, but just based on the objectives and what it took for me to create the course, I think that's what really is the case.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. We always worry about that. I've seen a number of people online say, oh, you need to take the 006 because the 007 is much harder. How can anyone know this? You would have had to take the 006 and take the 007, and you would have had to take them both multiple times to be able to have seen all of the possible questions that you could have been asked to have been even able to make that statement. And even then, I'm not sure you would have been able to make that statement. I think a lot of people just have a fear of the unknown, and the 007 is one of those that is unknown. So they feel like that's going to be harder. I don't think that's the case at all. I think they're probably comparable in their difficulty level. I don't think there's any difference between any of those. Are there practice questions for the N10-007? I don't have any practice questions for 007. I have on the list, this is a very big list, I have on my list to create a set of practice exams. Some of you know on the A+, I created this pop quiz collection, which is just this massive number, thousands of questions, not thousands, but over 1,000 questions total for both of them. Just a massive number of questions. And what a lot of people said is I need something more structured. So I would like to create maybe sample exams. I think that may be something that can help you simulate an actual exam. And I would like to make these probably have the same feel, the same flavor as an actual certification exam. So I think that's probably the direction I'm going to take. And I do have on a list to do that type of thing for Security Plus, for Network Plus, for A Plus. Those are things that They're on my list. They're pretty high on the list. I would like to create those. I think if I had a video course, some course notes, and some good Q&A, I think that's a huge chunk of what people need. I can't necessarily give you the hands-on. That's the last piece I think is really important that people have, and a good book. So those are the things I don't necessarily I don't have a way to provide those necessarily, or an interest, but I can give you those three things in the middle: good video series, some course notes, and some good Q&A. And I think a lot of people need that. I think it'd be nice to have for most people as well. Let's go back to the calls. We have the 575 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Chris, and I'm from Hobbs, New Mexico.
Welcome, Chris. What can we do for you?
Oh, actually, wanted to thank you. I used your 006 courses, and I passed my Net Plus. It was probably a month ago, actually.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
And thank you. And I had a real quick question. I'm about to take the 501 Security Plus. Do you see a lot of crossover with that information? Because in the book I have, I'm probably 40 to 50% of the way through the book. It seems like a lot of review.
There is a chunk of overlap. There's even more overlap between the 007 and the 501. But it's not, a lot of people say half of the materials overlap. It's nowhere close to that, by the way. Maybe 10% is overlap, maybe 15, maybe, depending on how you count the different sections that you need. There really isn't that much overlap, but you will definitely find some. In fact, it's not even similar. There's identical sections on the SY0501 Security Plus that are also on the N10-007. It was very easy for me to create that section of the exam because I simply copied and pasted, and now I had the content I needed. And I might have added and changed a few things that made it specific to networking or specific to security, but the content was really very similar. It's not as much as you might think, though. When you start getting into more details about, especially Section 6 of security, which deals all with cryptography, all of that's brand new. None of that's on Network Plus.
Yeah, that's my next 3 chapters is cryptology and
there
hashing.
You go. So you're going to get into some of this where none of this was covered in networking. But you're right. There is a section, and a lot of it is not just similar, it's identical, which is only an advantage for you if you're somebody who's very familiar with that content already.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate the call, Chris. That always helps. So you can build on it. There's a little bit of A Plus in Network Plus. There's a nice chunk of Network Plus that's in Security Plus. It's not half, but it is a nice chunk. So you might run into that. If you are someone who is building on these, you're taking one after the other, they really do build on each other. I think you'll even find now, knowing what they're doing with A Plus, because I'm working on that content now, a lot more of the A Plus is going to overlap with Network Plus now. You're starting to see more overlap with those. In fact, there's a little bit of overlap with Security Plus in there as well. So I think that just makes sense. It kind of follows the same path of technology and how we're using it these days, because there are technologists that are down at the help desk level that are connecting into Active Directory and performing security functions. There are certainly networking people that are responsible for configuring security with their networking technologies, securing switches, securing routers, implementing 802.1x. And then, of course, on the security side, we have all falls back to all of those operating systems and networks as well. So that becomes important too. Back to the phones. We have the 212 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, hi. My name is Mike. I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
Welcome, Mike.
What?
Welcome. What can we do for you?
Okay, so I am a person who's like very new to all of this. I mean, like my background is like graphic design and web design, and for the time being, it's not doing anything for me. Someone made a professor I used to learn from in college like a long time ago. He dropped the idea of like doing Network Plus. So I follow your videos with the Cybex book that I bought. Okay. You know, even though they rearranged the objectives in a certain way, and you have your objectives actually in order. You know, so I'm following like little by little. But for a guy like me who's never actually done all this, I find this like a lot of it is like overwhelming.
Yeah, especially Network Plus, it certainly can be. And by the way, any book is going to be in a different order than the CompTIA exam objectives. I think the CompTIA exam objectives have advantages. I put all of my videos in order of the objectives so that you can find them based on the book that you're using, because all books are going to be in a different order, and most books will cross-reference what's in a chapter with what objectives they are covering in that chapter. So sometimes that will help. But you're right, Network Plus is just tons of abbreviations and acronyms that you have to remember, on top of some very detailed network theory. And these are not simple ideas in networking. Understanding routing functions, being able to understand subnets, trying to figure out how these different multi-netting works, which are concepts in the N10-006 and the N10-007. They're something to have to be able to use. I think if you're doing Network Plus, it helps immensely if you can get some hands-on. Now, in graphic design, you're not going to get any hands-on in networking. This may be the point where
I know for sure.
You might want to start looking into things like Cisco and their network certifications. They use Packet. The Packet. What's the name of the utility? It's now escaping me. Somebody will tell me in the chat room. The Cisco. Why can I not? Packet Tracer. Thank you. So Packet Tracer is a free utility from Cisco. You just have to sign up to Cisco's website. You have to register to get it. But it's a utility that essentially allows you to virtualize an entire network without having any physical switches, any physical routers, any physical servers. You simply drag them and drop them on the screen. You connect them together. You assign some IP addresses, and you can visually watch the packets go back and forth between all of them. You can log into a server and start doing pings and trace routes and see how it affects and goes through the network. So for somebody like me, that I'm not interested in buying a bunch of switches and a bunch of routers just to be able to pass Network Plus, Packet Tracer is awesome because you can build an enterprise network in a matter of minutes, connect it all together, press a button, and it's live. And you start testing things. You can look at routing tables. You can watch the ping happen. It's a nice little utility.
When you say virtualization, are you talking about like kind of virtualization that AMD says that they have on their CPU, where you can put like a live on like because like I've heard of this, and I've done something like this on my computer. Like I max my computer out to like terabytes. I max out all the memory just so I could have like multiple operating systems and then just see how they're all. I could see how customer service does this.
Sure. And what a great way to get hands-on as well. And for those of you working on your A+, or you're trying to get your hands on some virtual Windows systems, if you go to modern.ie, modern.ie, that's Microsoft's developer site, and they have virtual machines of the Windows operating system that you can download and use as lab systems. That's certainly a type of operating system virtualization that's very common to use if you want to run multiple operating systems on a desktop. When I talk about virtualization with Packet Tracer, it's all within the Cisco application. It is simulating, it's really not virtualizing, it's simulating an actual switch. It's simulating a router, but you don't have a physical switch. You don't have a physical router. It's simply putting those icons on the screen and performing in software as if they were physical devices. It's not the same as doing operating system virtualization, although the concept is very similar.
Wow.
It goes well beyond the scope, by the way, of Network Plus. So I would not recommend that everybody doing Network Plus go use Packet Tracer, because there is quite a bit of a learning curve to get there. But once you get the basics of Packet Tracer and you can use it, and there's plenty of videos out there that kind of walk you through, a lot of the concepts of Network Plus become a lot easier to understand, especially if you've never worked with networks before. That may be a way to help you out.
Thank God.
And I can't believe Cisco makes it available for free, but that should help you out, Mike.
Thank you. Your information was really like spot on, and for a guy like brand new to all of this, I'm still going to take the Network Plus. I'm still doing the 007 series, and I'm hoping to pass this thing. And like, I don't know what else I need, but I'm just hoping that this can springboard me to something, something much better.
We never know. I think getting my knowledge in networking allowed me to do anything else I wanted to do in IT. So I personally think having a knowledge of the network opens a lot more doors than almost any other thing that you're going to do in technology. I think it's a great place to go.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling. I appreciate it. That was my perspective of it. Once I understood that on this wire, there was a conversation taking place, and I had to become the translator of what was going back and forth between all of these servers and be able to understand and be able to react to it. It's remarkable what you're able to do at that point. Back to the phones. Thanks for holding so long. The 312 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi there. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name's Alex. I'm from Chicago. I just had a couple quick questions that have always been lurking in the back of my head.
Sure.
I'm currently working I'm pretty ready for the 106. I'm planning on taking at the end of next month. And one of my questions is there like really an age limit for going into IT, or would you say that pretty much anyone that can really study material can get into IT?
Well, the getting certified, there's certainly no age limit or age limitation to getting a CompTIA certification, or really most certifications in IT. You can be any age and get certified. That's a little different than actually getting a job in IT. And by the way, before I forget, you mentioned taking the 006 at the end of next month. And of course, the N10-006 Network Plus exam is retired at the end of August. So if you're planning to get that certification, anyone listening, make sure you get it with a few days to spare there at the end of next month. That's going to be pretty important to you. But what you'll find is that the people who are hiring are looking for people that are mature, that have experience, that have knowledge, and a lot of these things come over time. And they know that someone walking in the door that is just out of high school, just out of college, or very early in their career may not have all of the experiences that they might be looking for. So that there is in some way ageism at the very low level, just as there may be ageism at the very high level within information technology. But a lot of the times that ageism is based on experience. And if you're somebody who has had the opportunity to do a lot with technology, whether it's been in a formal position or elsewhere, that can certainly help you if you're walking in the door and competing with people that may be older than you in that same particular decision making.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I knew that the 106 is being canceled this in August.
Good.
I was trying to get it in under the wire so I can still get it and still get everything taken care of for that. I had another question for you, but I forgot what it was. So I guess thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex.
Oh, and thank you very much for posting all the great material. I really enjoy all of it. It's just fantastic.
I'm glad you're able to take advantage of it. Best of luck next month, and hopefully we can get that Network Plus certification.
Thank you very much. You have a wonderful day.
You too. There will be people taking the Network Plus certification the last day it's available. So if you're one of those people and you're working towards getting that Network Plus done at the end of next month, there's plenty of people there with you. You are not alone when it comes to that. Back to the phones. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Let's see if we got this caller. I think this might be a Skype caller or an international caller. Are you there, caller? Caller. That might be a good opportunity to check. I'm going to put you back in the queue. Also, if you're calling on Skype, you may want to consider using that Skype call-in test service so that you can see if your microphone is working the way you would expect. I'm trying to get you back in the queue. Maybe you're going back in the queue. Maybe I crashed my whole phone system. which can sometimes help too. Nope, I think you disappeared. We'll go to the next one on the list, though. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Professor Messer. My name is Alan. I'm calling from New Jersey.
Hey, Alan.
So I was calling about the network, the 006 exam. I've been studying for it on and off past 2 or 3 months, and it got to a point where I was debating whether or not I wanted to go with the CCNT as opposed to the Network Plus.
Sure.
And in that way, because I already have my A+, and I have a few years experience in desktop support, so it's kind of, Cisco is kind of held at at a better standard. But I know with the CCNA, there's 2 routes where you can take the accelerated exam, or you could take the ICND1 and then the ICND2.
Right.
So there's like 2 options of getting it, but I'm not sure. So the first question is I'm not sure whether it's better to kind of continue on with the 006 exam, even though I have about 2 months left, or I can kind of switch gears to the CCNT and then take the second part exam to make it a little bit easier as well to get the CCNA. My other question I had was there any difference in the performance-based or lab-based questions between the 007 and the 006 exam for the Network Plus?
Let's start with that one, and then we'll sort of unwrap the concept of Cisco exams versus Network Plus exams. We'll break down those pieces as well. There are, for the Network Plus N10-006 and 007, I think the exams are going to be pretty comparable in the way that the questions are asked. In fact, they might be even a little better. I think the 006 exam could have used a little bit of help in how the questions are asked. And I think in the latest Security Plus, I think they did a much better job at how the questions were being asked. And sometimes reading through some of these older exams, it sounds like they translated them to another language and then translated them back to English. And that's what you had to take on the exam. So I think they may have figured out that they needed to make the questions a little bit easier. They may have done that. I haven't seen everything on the N10-007 side. I don't have any insight. I don't have any special insider views into what's going on at CompTIA. I'm not a CompTIA partner. I don't want to be a CompTIA partner. I want to be independent. But that also means I don't see what goes on behind the scenes. I talk to people at CompTIA, and I know some of the projects they have going on at a very outsider level. I have no insider scoops or knowledge about anything, nor do I want it. But what I have seen makes me believe that the performance-based questions are going to be comparable between them. I don't see there being a big shift to make them more complex or harder to take. And I think part of that you can see because the N10-007 is 65% identical to the N10-006. So there's so much overlap between the two. Network technology doesn't change that quickly. So I think you're going to see that from a difficulty level, they're going to be pretty comparable. Now, the thing you're going to find, and this is another one of these questions that I very, very commonly get, which is, should I take Network Plus or should I go with the Cisco and move that direction? And I think a lot of people want to move up to Cisco because they can see that a lot of employers, especially for higher level positions, would like to have somebody who has their CCNA certification. The CCNA, the Cisco Certified Network Administrator certification, is a very popular certification in the network world. It is very much asked for as one of the minimum entry-level requirements when you're getting into networking. And some of these jobs in networking pay a good bit more than the help desk. And so financially and from a career perspective, they're very attractive. That's a very attractive certification. There are 2 ways you can earn your CCNA certification. You can take this single exam that gives you, it's one exam that covers everything you need. And with one exam, you can earn your CCNA. That is the Interconnecting Cisco Networking Devices Accelerated exam. And the only people who should ever be taking that exam are people that are already so familiar with Cisco that they really didn't have to study very much for this. It is a very difficult exam. It is an extremely broad exam, and it is an extremely complex exam. And I don't recommend anybody ever take that exam unless people just look at you and know that you're the Cisco master. You are the person who really understands Cisco in and out. There's no question about the technology, and you just haven't done it, so now you're going to get that CCNA certification. That's a pretty rare individual that would be in that position, to be really positioned properly to do well and pass that exam. Doesn't mean that other people couldn't, but that's where I see that exam positioned in the industry. Most people, most sane people, most people honest about what they know are going to take the two exams that it takes to earn the CCNA certification. That's the ICND1 and the ICND2. This is the Interconnecting Cisco Networking Devices Part 1 and the Interconnecting Cisco Networking Devices Part 2. Both of these exams are incredibly complex exams on their own. They are not easy exams to pass. They are light years beyond the Network Plus exam. You cannot compare even the ICND1 with the Network Plus. They are two completely different exams designed for people that are planning to do two completely different things in IT. What most people will do is get their Network Plus, become familiar with networking, get at least a network job where they have some type of work that they can do on the networking side, become more familiar with it, and then ease their way into Cisco. A lot of people will say, just don't take Network Plus. Don't waste your time with Network Plus. Just go to ICND1. And what a lot of people will find is they go directly to ICND1 and they are completely overwhelmed because now suddenly you have to know everything that's in the Network Plus exam, and you have to know everything there is to know about configuring a Cisco switch to perform some very complex functions on those devices, and Cisco routers. You have to do both switching and routing in that exam. So that's a big exam, and they are not comparable at all to anything relating to Network Plus. So really it comes back to what someone's trying to do. Are you trying to get that help desk position? Are you trying to get that entry-level position? Are you trying to get in the door somewhere? Perhaps Network Plus is the better choice. Or are you having longer-term goals where you really are very interested in networking? You've had some experience with networking. You would really like to do a lot more with networking, and that's really your focus. Then I could see someone deciding not to go the Network Plus route, perhaps go the Cisco route and start with those certifications with the knowledge that it's going to take a lot longer to learn what you need to know for the ICND1 because it's a much more complex exam. So these aren't interchangeable at all, but they do fit better depending on what you're trying to do. Hopefully that's given you at least a little bit of insight, Alan, into the differences between those.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I'm going for my Network Plus, and I want to have a good foundation and kind of get a strong basic understanding of networking before I jump into like a systems engineer role and working like with Cisco equipment and so forth. But eventually the goal, that's like my long-term goal, to kind of move up from desktop support into network or security. So that's very helpful to know, and I think I'm going to continue on and take my 006 soon enough before it retires.
I think it's a good plan of attack, Alan. Best of luck.
Thank you. All right, Professor. Bye-bye.
As someone who has been a systems engineer with Network General and Protocol Analyzer, someone who's been a systems engineer at Network Associates and worked on the security side, and been a systems engineer with Palo Alto Networks and worked on next generation firewalls, I can tell you that those types of positions do require you to have that Cisco certification level knowledge to be able to operate that equipment, to be able to understand how it works, to be able to integrate it into somebody's network. If you're working to get to that level, you eventually need to start taking those certifications. I personally could not imagine trying to take a Cisco level exam without any type of networking knowledge whatsoever. That really is a longer term type of thing. I almost think it's better to get the Network Plus, even if you're planning to get the Security Plus, because you have to learn that anyway. Why not get certified with it and then use that knowledge and roll it right into the ICND1? I think it just makes sense. Other people don't think that the Network Plus, it's interesting. They say the Network Plus isn't worth it. So you need to learn exactly what you need to know for the Cisco exam, which happens to be identical to the Network Plus. So it seems like the Network Plus does have value because everything in the Network Plus seems to be on that first Cisco exam, practically 99% of it. There's some VPN stuff that's not in there, but almost everything is. So I don't listen to people when they say there's no value and then tell me you need to take an exam that has exactly the same content in it. Something isn't jiving there with me. Back to the calls. Thanks for holding for so long. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, my name's Austin. I'm from Washington State.
Welcome. What can we do for you?
So about 2-3 years ago, I went for my associates in computer networking, and about 6 months in, I took my 006. Unfortunately, I had more or less a big head and only skimmed over the book. Yeah.
How'd that turn out?
I was kind of, I failed by about like 40 points.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's not bad though. Well, that's pretty close for someone skimming over the book though. Okay. So keep going.
All right. So that was my situation. I'm now, several years down. I finally just got a new job working in a NOC role with phone systems.
Great.
However, I'm coming back into the Network Plus, and I had two different questions. The first was, should I go for the 006 or just roll right over to the 007? And depending on that, how should I set up a study plan? Because for my issue is that I've been kind of skimming back and forth between your videos, CBT Nuggets, my exam cram book, and I'm just kind of all over the place. And having a structure has always been really difficult for me, or at least creating a structure.
That's for anybody. That's a problem for anybody. Now, if you're like me, if it's been 3 years since you took that exam, how much of that content do you think you remember from the 006 test you took 3 years ago?
And maybe half.
Maybe. So you're actually much better off than I would be 3 years down the line. I probably wouldn't remember much of that at all. It would be kind of like starting over for me. So I guess that's the real question is, first, where do you think you are knowledge-wise with that content? And secondly, what type of time do you think you're going to have to learn what you don't know? I think at this point, with only a month and a half left for the 006, you may be putting some undue pressure on yourself to get all of this crammed into your head and passed before the end of August. And I think that's an unnecessary deadline. There's just, because the 006 and the 007 are so very similar to each other, and you are really, I think, effectively going to be starting over with your studies. I think for you, it might make more sense to start over with the 007 materials, and then you don't have to worry about any type of drop dead date associated with that exam going away and then having to start over again anyway. I think maybe starting with 007 materials would make a lot more sense. It is entirely up to you. And if you're the kind of person who feels very motivated by that exam going away and you think that's what you need, I guess I can appreciate that. That may be what a lot of people are doing right now is using that as their ultimate motivation to get that content done and then having the certification and not having to move to the 007. That part is really up to you. Now let's talk about how you structure a studies to go around this incredible amount of content that's on the Network Plus exam, regardless of which one you're going to take. And what I usually will recommend to people is you use the CompTIA exam objectives. CompTIA has created an extensive set of objectives. I'm going to bring them up on the screen as I'm talking here for the people that are watching, so that maybe people just haven't seen these before, but they are extensive in the amount of content and information that's available in the exam objectives. It is probably one of the best study sources for any of your exam pieces that you're going to take. The exam objectives will take you through every single section, And you can see if you're watching the screen on mine, I even color code things so that I can go back and change things and look at them. And I did this when I was building the course out. Things that were yellow were changed. Things that were green were not. Things that were purple were things I needed to update a little bit. So you can kind of see my thought process as I was going through the structure of building this course out. But you can do exactly the same thing. You can start with section 1. Let's pretend we're going to study for this exam. Section 1 is explain the purposes and uses of ports and protocols, and then they give you a list of every single protocol and every single port number you need to know. Now, this isn't simply memorizing these. You need to, if they say SSH is port 22, you need to understand what SSH is, not just the name. Oh, that's secure shell. No. You need to go much deeper than what is secure shell. How do you use it? How is it useful on the network? And what port number does it use? That's the type of information they're looking. You want to know the purposes and the uses of these ports and protocols. And then they give you protocol types, and then they ask you to know the difference between a connection-oriented protocol and a connectionless protocol. Well, there's your first section. If you're looking for structure, there's the first block of information you need to learn. And now you've got a checklist. You don't need to know anything beyond the scope of this list. You need to know everything that is on this list. And if you know that, you'll be able to answer any question they're asking of you relating to the content in section 1.1, explain the purposes and uses of ports and protocols. You can check off the things you know. You can circle the things you don't know well. You can highlight the things you need to come back to. And then you can either learn those or go to the next section. And you just take it a chunk at a time. As I mentioned on an earlier phone call, every book is going to be set up in a different structure and a different format, and every book is going to be different than the structure and format of the CompTIA exam objectives. But a lot of books will tell you when you start chapter 1 of the book what type of exam, what number of exam objective it's relating to. So one of the things you can do in the back of a lot of books is it gives a list of the exam objectives and tells you what chapter is associated with it. So you might want to go to the back of your book, find out what chapter is associated with section 1.1 of the exam objectives. Oh, that's chapter 16. Maybe on that book, you start with chapter 16 and you go through the entire book in the same format of the exam objectives, or do it in reverse. Do whichever way you're comfortable with, but use that as your checklist. And that way, you know in your mind, how much of this do I know? How much of this do I not know? Am I ready to go into the exam? Well, let's see how many things I don't know yet. And if you know 90% of these exam objectives, you're probably ready to take the test.
That makes sense. As I mentioned, I've been very back and forth in terms of what videos or books or Quizlets I'm reading over. And more or less, that's not the best case that I should go for, but using the exam objectives and just checking it off one at a time until I make it through every single objective will make for a nice linear path.
I think it does. I think it works that way for a lot of people. Not everybody has a different way of learning this content, obviously. You've got all the right resources. You've got a good book. You've got at least one video series or maybe two available to you. Maybe find some Q&A and get some good hands-on. You know, those are the 4 things I always recommend people have. Is you need a good book, you need some good Q&A, you need a good video series, you need some good hands-on. If you have those 4 things, then every time you get to a topic and you go to section 1.2 that says, explain the OSI model, now I can go to each one of those resources, look through that resource for what they say about the OSI model, collect it all, get it stuck in my brain, check off that I know that one, and then go to the next set.
Excellent. Appreciate the help.
Absolutely. Good luck, Austin. That's always the challenge, is structuring this so it works for you. And I think that's whenever I start trying to structure out a course of study, I use the exam objectives every time, whether it's Microsoft, which their exam objectives are a little anemic, to say the least, but I use those as my path. And for Microsoft, for example, their exam objectives are a 1-pager. They don't give a lot of detail in their exam objectives. So what I usually do is go to their exam objectives, and then I get the Microsoft Press book. Because in my mind, I'm thinking if Microsoft Press is putting out a book, that's probably going to be a pretty close approximation to what they're expecting. It may not be 100%, but I think that's a good bet, right? That Microsoft's book is going to be, and then I go to the book and I say, section 1.1 is this. Let me find where that is in the book, and I follow the same path again, going through those pieces. That's how I do it. It's not 100% in any case, but at least now you know you're covering all the things that are in the list. You've gone through them methodically, and you know you didn't miss anything. So that's the biggest thing for me. Back to the phone calls. Caller's been holding for a while. Hey, caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? I hear you stumbling around there.
Hello, Professor. My name is Hassan.
Hey, thank you for calling. What's your question?
Hello. Yes, my name is Hassan. I'm calling from Liverpool, UK.
Oh, welcome, Hassan. Thank you for calling. What can we do for you?
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Just to thank you first, I passed my Security Plus last week, and it was really a tough exam.
It is a tough exam.
Thanks
Congratulations.
to videos. And so now I come to the point that where do I go next? Apparently, I've been interested in the server side, but again, once you started, you can't come back because the server side is a serious exam. So you have to take the 410, 411, 412. So it will take maybe a year or two to finish them. So just wanted your advice. So what should I go from here?
At this point, once you get through and you have a good solid networking foundation, you have a good solid security foundation, at least at a certification level, the real question now becomes, what do you want to do with your career? What is the next step for you? If you want to go into network administration, it's a Cisco related path. Almost 100% of the time, it's going to be a Cisco related path. If you're someone who wants to get into more of security, then you might want to get more of a security focus. Maybe you're going to look at the CISSP or the related certifications from ICND2. Maybe you want to get a certification from a particular manufacturer. Maybe you want to become very knowledgeable in Palo Alto Networks firewalls. Maybe you want to be somebody who's very knowledgeable in SIMs and understanding how to collect data with syslog and create reports and do report building. And there's tons of software packages out there that do that type of thing. Maybe you want to be someone who focuses more on the operating system side, and you want to get more Linux knowledge and more Windows knowledge and how to apply some of those security techniques to those operating systems. There are jobs and positions and careers built on those different layers that you could do for the rest of your career until you retire. And then, of course, those might take you other places as well. So the real question is kind of me pointing the mirror back at you and saying, now that you've got this fundamental knowledge, where is it that you want to focus? And that's the part that's probably the most difficult for many people, is figuring out the niche that makes sense for you. And I think a lot of times the niche will find you. You will find that I really like networking, and you end up going on the network side. Or you start working with some of these other technologies and you realize, I really like the idea of SIMs and doing this overall reporting, or I like this next generation firewall technology. And that's the path you naturally go down because that's the one that interests you the most. Sometimes that is the most logical path, is just to follow the thing you like the most. Sometimes it's a hiring position. Somebody is hiring for a particular job and they're demanding that you have a particular set of skills. Maybe that's what's directing you, and everybody's geography is a little bit different from that perspective. Hopefully that's, in your mind, Hassan, are there particular technologies that interest you, or is there a particular path you want to go down?
Yeah, I'm interested in the network side, but I've been looking jobs around in where I live, and apparently, if you look for networking or anywhere you go in IT, they don't want just networking. They want a knowledge from server side as well. So when I was doing my Security Plus, I was looking security jobs. And then when I was doing my network plus, I was looking them. All of the time, they wanted someone who's got experience from the server side, regardless whether you got all these other skills. So the server is kind of fundamental. So when I didn't want to go to the server because we're networking, I was looking to go to the CCNA side. But even if I have the CCNA, they still ask for server side knowledge as well.
It's probably, that's very common though. You'll see that almost in any geography, but fortunately, companies like Microsoft and CompTIA and other places have Linux and Windows certification programs to go through that can really give you everything you need to know on the server side to get started. And jumping from there into networking is a pretty good path too. I said earlier in the study group that I think networking, a good foundational networking knowledge, allows you to do anything else in IT. It gives you the jumping off point to do anything else in IT. And being able to backtrack and grab some of that server knowledge can only help you. I got a Microsoft MCSE certification back in the day when I had to get that. It was Windows NT, just to give you an idea how far back that was. So obviously Windows 2000 server and 2012 and the others have come since then. But Microsoft's operating system underneath the hood hasn't really changed that much. There obviously are some functions of the operating system that have evolved over time, but you learn so much about the kernel and the underlying Windows operating system and the way the disks are labeled and how they operate and the file systems. And you understand the permissions and rights. And you really get a very good foundational understanding of the server operating system overall. That has, even though I got that so very long ago, that knowledge still helps me today when I start working with some of these other technologies that integrate into Active Directory. You know, Active Directory hasn't really changed that much over time at its foundational level. So those types of certifications, they may seem like, oh, I've got to go back and take a server certification but I want to do networking. Trust me, it is going to help you so much on networking. Let me give you an example. Whenever I was a systems engineer for Palo Alto Networks, our firewall integrated with Active Directory. And it integrated because you could set up firewall rules that said, if you were a member of the shipping and receiving department, then you had these types of rights and permissions through the firewall. That allowed us to create rules on the firewall that were very flexible. And as people were hired into the shipping and receiving department, they would automatically have access through the firewall with the rights and permissions associated with their particular job role. As they left the shipping and receiving department, those particular allows and disallows on the firewall would no longer work for them because they weren't part of that Active Directory group. Even though I was on the firewall side, I had to understand exactly how to access Active Directory across the network, how to properly configure the authentication into the Active Directory database, how to be able to pull the correct information via LDAP from Active Directory, and then be able to finally troubleshoot all of that if there was a problem. There's no way I'd be able to do that without having a good, solid foundation of Windows Server, or at least that part of the Windows Server operating system. It can really only help you. And so when you see these jobs that say, yeah, we need a good networking person, and you're also going to need to know server, that's part of the reason why they're saying that, is because there's such an important consideration to integrating all of these different pieces together from one end of the network to the other.
Thank you, Professor. It's really been helpful, and thank you very much for the video and the group study, and I really appreciate it, and thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Hassan. Best of luck. That is always a concern. And I'll have to tell you, when I got into integrating into Active Directory and setting up the LDAP queries and then troubleshooting this, because we would set it up and we'd give it a username and password. We'd have to have an agent that was running on a Windows device. The agent needed its own rights and permissions. There were so many things that can go wrong with that. At one point, we eventually had this great little troubleshooting guide we created for everybody that says, you're going to install this, and if you get this message, this is what you did wrong. If you get this message, this is what you did wrong. And so you could go through all of those different pieces and figure out all of those. So that's the piece. And I see we dropped off. After all of that, we dropped off the pieces. I'm going to come right back to it. We're going to go just to finish up so that people didn't know I left them hanging. We're going to make sure that they know we were almost there with all of those pieces. We're going to get coming back. We'll see. We'll get there in a second. When did it drop off? 6 minutes ago. That's one of those. So I'll be able to upload a new version of this and have that available to people as well with all of those. So we'll get all of that back up and running on the stream. People can tell me as we're starting up that stream again, we made it so far. We were doing so well on that stream and having it live that we almost did it. We're starting up those pieces. It tells me that my health is good. It didn't even tell me that the stream went away. How you like that? Now we're live. Welcome back, everybody, to the live stream. So we were able to get a few things. As I mentioned earlier, still working out a few of those weirdness things that are happening with the stream and having those come through. And I do expect there will be some improvements to this. Hopefully next week. I'm planning some upgrades on those pieces. Those of you in the chat room, hopefully you're able to see now back to where we were. I know that a lot of you, and I see that my stream, it's telling me that that's not really working out so well for all of those pieces. So hopefully you're able to see some of that too and pull it back. But I'm at least back long enough to tell you that we're out of time. After all of that, we now don't have enough time to keep going. Thank you, chat room. They see me. Sorry that it dropped off there at the end. What I will do for those of you watching, I will be creating a new version of this and uploading it so that it's one that has all that in there, and you get to see the last bit of information I was able to provide to Hassan and all of those other pieces there. We do have another study group in Security Plus that is going to be happening next week. So if you're someone who is studying on their Security Plus side, the Security Plus 401 expires at the end of or retires at the end of this month. So only a couple of weeks left for you to be able to get that last bit of Security Plus in. And we're going to be doing some last minute cramming next week on the Security Plus study group. It's also on Wednesday. Check back same time next week on Wednesday. And of course, you can always find out exactly when those are going to be by going to professormesser.com/calendar. That'll always tell you what's going on with those. Thank you for joining us this time. Thank you for being here in the first hour of the study group in the Q&A. Thank you for being here in the second part in the after show. We really could not do this without you. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time on the next Network Plus study group.